As promised, we'll read today from Intra Muros by Rebecca Ruter Springer. Welcome to Out of the Blue number 568.25. Chapter 11, page 93. She says, as the days passed, I found my desires often led me to the sacred lake, sometimes alone, sometimes with one or more of my own family circle. My revered father and precious mother, my dear brother and sister, and many beloved friends, both within and without the bond of consanguinity. It was always to me an inspiration and an uplifting. I never could grow sufficiently familiar with it to overcome the first great awe with which it inspired me. But I found that the oftener I bathed or floated and slept in its pellucid current, the stronger I grew in spirit, and the more clearly I comprehended the mysteries of the world about me. My almost daily intercourse with the dear ones of our home life, from whom I had so long been separated, served to restore to me the home feeling that had been the greatest solace of my mortal life. And I began to realize that this was indeed the true life, instead of that probationary life which we had always regarded as such. I Just to translate that line, I began to realize that this was indeed the true life instead of that probationary life which we had always regarded as such. So what she's saying is the probationary life is this life on earth, which we think is our true life, but then that world we go to is actually our true life. She says, I think it was the day after my return from my first visit to earth that, as I started to cross the sward between my father's house and my own, I heard my name called in affectionate tones. I turned and saw approaching me a tall, fine-looking man whose uncovered head was silvery white, and whose deep blue eyes looked happily and tenderly into mine as he drew near. Oliver, I cried, with outstretched hands of welcome. Dear, dear Oliver. It was the husband of my eldest sister, always dearly loved. Oliver says, I did not know that you had come until a few moments since, when our father told me. It is delightful to have you here. It seems more like the old life to see you than any of the others who are here. We were together so much during the last years of my stay, he said, grasping my hands warmly. Where are you going now? Can you not come with me a while? I was thinking only a few days ago how much I wished you could be here a little while before Lou came. You know her tastes so well. And now here you are. So often our unspoken wishes are thus gratified in heaven. Is my sister coming soon? I asked a little later. That I cannot definitely say, but you know the years of the earth life are passing, and her coming cannot be much longer delayed. Can you come with me now? Gladly, I said, turning to walk with him. It is only a little way from here, just where the river bends. Lou loves the water so I chose that spot in preference to one even nearer your home. This is truly enchanting, I cried as we drew near the place. I have not been this way before. I want you to see the river from her room windows, he said. I know you will enjoy it. We entered a truly beautiful house, built of the purest white granite, so embedded in the foliage of the flower-laden trees that from some points only glimpses of its fine proportions could be seen. She loves flowers so much, will she not enjoy these trees? He asked with almost boyish delight. Beyond everything, I answered. We passed through several delightful rooms on the lower floor, and ascending the stairway, which in itself was a dream of beauty, entered the room he was so anxious I should see. I stopped upon the threshold with an exclamation of delight while he stood watching with keen enjoyment the expression on my face. It is the most delightful room I ever saw, I cried enthusiastically. The framework of couches, chairs, and desks was of pure and spotless pearl, upholstered in dim gold. Start over. The framework of couches, chairs, and desks was of pure and spotless pearl, upholstered in dim gold, soft rugs and draperies everywhere, and through the low window opening upon the flower-wreathed balcony, so enchanting a view of the smooth, broad river below that again I caught my breath in delight. 1,000 exquisite tints from the heavens above were reflected upon the tranquil waters, and a boat floating on the current was perfectly mirrored in the opaline tinted ripples. Far across the shining waters the celestial hills rose, with domes and pillared temples and sparkling fountains perceptible everywhere. When at last I turned from this entrancing view, I saw on the opposite wall, smiling down upon me, the same divine face that I daily looked upon in my own room at home. Okay, so first of all, that last line, I saw on the opposite wall the same divine face. At home, she has a picture of Jesus on the wall, and here in the sister's house that the brother-in-law is building, same picture. So this places it in this map of J. Hewitt Mackenzie. So in J. Hewitt Mackenzie, the 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 seven spirit spheres, seven being the top, one being the bottom. On the second spirit sphere is the heaven of all religions. Every religion has its own heaven where you get to go to your own heaven, and it's on the second spirit sphere, which is a very rather low one. But I want to point out that though it's a low spirit sphere, it's still stunning. Like, look at this. 1,000 exquisite tints from the heaven above were reflected upon the tranquil waters, and a boat floating on the current was perfectly mirrored in the opaline tinted ripples. So the second sphere itself is utterly gorgeous, and it just gets better from there, according to J. Hewitt Mackenzie. But I also want to point out what makes this compelling. So what makes this compelling is not the beautiful descriptions, and it's not the similarity to Swedenborg. What makes this compelling is the way it is pertinent to our daily life today. Because today, people are waking up from cardiac arrest with these similar stories, with lines like this. She says, "Far across the shining waters the celestial hills arose with domes and pillared temples and sparkling fountains perceptible everywhere." Well, if you get into near-death writings, people are awakening from their heart being stopped, and they have it. They describe similar scenes. They get to the person dies. The near-death experience will go something like the person's heart stops. They float above their body in a hospital room. They go down a tunnel of light. They get to the gates of heaven. They see Grandma, and off in the distance, far across the shining waters, the celestial hills rose with domes and pillared temples and sparkling fountains perceptible everywhere. They describe things like this. People like you and me, people who speak English, people who are modern people in the world today, are describing this sort of thing. And also the architecture. So all these books, this book has a whole section on the houses. What's the other one? Is Monsignor Hugh Benson talks about his house. Francesco, Wanderer in the Spirit Lands, talks about he starts out sleeping on the ground, Francesco, and then he gets this little room, then he gets a little house in the land of the dawn, and then he ends up this other house which he describes at length. So there's a lot of architecture in houses, and it just seems like you can just make a house anywhere you want out of anything you want. Okay, and so that's what we're talking about in with this neo-Swedenborgianism. We're watching and looking at these similarities between the near-death experience accounts happening today and these longer, more detailed accounts which were written about by spiritualists in the 1890s. All right, so we'll get more into this later, and I just want to say thanks. See ya.